Okay, I'm live with Assimilate-Bash here, and I'm going to dive right into lesson 2 and start exploring what we can do with Bash. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this code space here. And there's a couple different things that I think would be fun to figure out today. I want to start with the Bash environment. That's probably the most useful thing to play around with. And then from there, once I've got that finished, I'll see if I have time and I'll do a little bit of linting. But I think the Bash environment is a great place to start with. So we'll say, nice to have or TBV here. And then I'm also going to do Bash environment. And then for the Bash environment, I'm going to refer to the official documentation. That's always a good idea when you're doing things. So if we take a look at the official documentation, a few things they mention are shell initializations, variables, quoting, all that kind of stuff. So let's kind of use that as a template to do things. I'm gonna put notes here about those different things so I don't forget. And I'll just change them into maybe bullets or something like that. We can do that. Go here, change all this up. See how many of these I can get. Aliases. And that's good enough. Let's try with that. So I think the first thing is this concept of shell initialization files here. And really, if it's Bash, the one you probably care about the most is bash rc. And so if we talk about tilde/.bashrc, this is something that's really important to be aware of if you're using any kind of Linux environment, because it's the shell that's going to be launched when you have an interactive prompt, and it'll be launched every single time, which is pretty nice. There's bash profile, which is launched just the first time you log in, but bash rc is constantly invoked. And so you can use it for really the starting for automation. So if we go here and we say a place to automate, and in particular, a good example of one of the things you can do with a bash rc would be to source, let's say, a Python virtual environment. So let's go ahead and try that out. If I go here and I say Python v-m venv, right? Like, let's say I create a Python virtual environment. It's really annoying to have to remember to source it all the time. So pretty easy. All I do is I go into my bash rc and then I put it into that environment, and then I never have to worry about it again. So how do we do this? Well, we can just open up Vim here and do bash rc. So this is a good thing to be aware of, is we can say, to edit tilde bash rc, do this, Vim bash rc. Perfect. Now if we go to the bottom here, this is where I could put in some kind of source command. So let's say, source Python virtual environments. You say source tilde.venv bin activate, like that, right? And again, the beauty of this is that if I go here and I type in source, is what happens the first time you open up a new shell. There we go. We see that that's actually been sourced. And if I go to a new shell, there we go. It's all launched. So this is a great place to just put stuff that you want to refer to all the time. Now, there's a couple little tricks here that I like to do because I do so much editing with my bash rc that I found to be pretty cool, and maybe some other people can steal these ideas. So that's going to make me hop over to aliases, and I'm going to show how I can use an alias to also help me edit my bash rc more frequently. So the idea with the alias is just a shortcut. And so if I go back to my bash rc here, and I just put this in here, actually create some really cool aliases. And so what I like to typically do in my alias file is I go here and I say aliases, this, and you can put anything you want. You could do, like, for example, like alias long ls is equal to ls-l, right? And if I go through here, again, I source this thing. Oops. Say source tilde bash rc. Say long ls. There we go. Right, I've got a long ls now. Just as one kind of silly example. But you notice how if you're going to start doing a lot of stuff to your shell initialization file, it's annoying to have to type source and all this stuff over and over and over again. So it's also annoying to have to do this. So what I've found is I have a little pattern that I like to use that I'll show. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to put like a section here that says, for editing tilde bash rc. So one of the things I like to do is I say alias, I say ez or e ec edit config. Let's try that. And what I do is I just type in the same command that. And so now this will actually edit the config anytime I just type in ec. And then, whoops, undo this. Another thing I can do is I can type in, RH or RL. How about that? Reload, and this will actually source the thing for me automatically. And so between those two commands, I can just edit and reload, edit and reload. So we can say source tilde slash dot bash rc. Let's go ahead and try this out. Well, the first time I have to still do it, but now that I've got this, if I type in alias, you can see all the different aliases that are available. And so we know that we've got a EC to edit. So if I just type in EC, it pops me right into the edit shell. And then if I want to get out here and I want to reload a change that I made, I just go RL and that reloads it. So let's go ahead and try that out. Let's try EC to edit something. So let's put one more alias in here, which would be, maybe like G temp, like go to temp, and we'll just be like CD temp, about that. And we'll go here, and I just type in RL to reload, and now I type in G temp. There we go, and now I'm in the temp directory, right? So pretty cool little trick to be able to reload, save, save. So we're able to do that very easily. And if again, I'll just put these inside of these notes right here. I'll say that to edit, this would be an example here, right? Say to edit the bash rc shortcut, and then this one is to reload bash rc shortcut. You just do this. You do alias. This one, just like that. So I personally find this to be super useful to use those kinds of things to configure my bash rc file. And I'll show you one other trick that I like to do that also corresponds with this is that if I'm working on a project, like lots of Python projects, one of the things that I do here, which is, let's see, go to here, go to workspace. Let's change into workspace. Let's go to bash template. Okay, there we go. So if I'm working on a lot of different Python projects, one of the things I do is I combine the virtual environment with my ability to CD into a directory. So let's say that I was going to work on a let's go up one level here, and let's just say I have two Python projects. I have Python project 1, PyProj, call this one PyProject CLI, and then I'll make another one which is PyProject Web. right? So I've got two different projects. This is a neat little trick that I like to do, which is I'll go to PyProj CLI and I'll take the name here, and then I'll also create a new virtual environment with the same name as this. So I'll say, Python 3 dash m venv tilde, and then I'll call it this name. So I'll say PyProj CLI dot. There we go. And now what I can do, which is kind of cool, is if I go back to EC, I edit my config, and I can put a little note here for, Python projects. Say Python projects. I can do this. I can say alias, just put the name of the project. So we'll say alias PyProj. I just copy it to be lazy. So let's go here. Right. And so we can do this. And then we can say CD into that, and then load the virtual environment. So we would say this bin activate, right? So you can see this is a nice little pattern that allows me to switch between different environments. And again, why some of these tools that are more complex, I just don't get it. I don't understand why you need more than this. And I'll show you. Then I would do the other one, and I would say PyProj web equals CD. Do the same thing. We say workspaces, and I'll just copy this name here like that. PyProj web, and I'll say this dot PyProj web bin activate. Now I didn't create the virtual environment yet. I'll just do that real quick. And I'll just say up a directory, make sure I didn't create the virtual environment yet. So I'll say Python 3 -m venv tilde / dot, and we'll call this one PyProj web, like that. Okay, so now, there we go. If I say reload, this will put all those in there, and I can now do this. I can say PyProj CLI, and it says home project bin activate. Not sure why that one is having an issue. I've never had that issue before. Maybe something unique about. Let's try to source it ourselves. So let's just say source tilde / dot PyProj CLI PyProject CLI bin activate. I screwed something up. Oh, I must not have sourced it. That's so I'll go back to edit the config. I didn't type in source, right? Yeah, I'm just trying to CD, so that's why it didn't work. So I need to type in source. Yeah. Also shows why it's really important to have the ability to go back and forth here. So if I say reload here, now I'll go back and I say PyProj CLI, boom, we're in PyProj CLI. And if I do PyProj web, there we go. And we can toggle back and forth. And if I went inside of here and I said pip install, I don't know, like PyLint, right? Let's do that. So we've got one dependency that's different. And then if I type in which PyLint, you can see it's referring to this. But then if I go back and I say PyProj CLI and I type in which PyLint, it's going to give it the system PyLint. So it's going to be using a totally different PyLint because it's a different environment. And so likewise, if I went pip install black or something like that, I wanted to now see if, which black tool, you can see it's referring to that. So this really is a nice little way to go here to switch back and forth between projects. Now, I also, if I go back to this environment here, and I say reload, notice how, look, it refers back to the base environment, right? So again, my opinion is some of these fancier tools that people use for Python are really not necessary once you understand this concept that we just went over. So we were able to cover some really cool stuff with aliases. We were able to cover also how to edit and reload your Bash environment. Let's play a little bit with variables here as well. So with variables here with Bash, let's see what they have to say. So we have variables is typical output. If you type in env or print env, it displays all the different variables. So let's go ahead and try that out. Let's type in env, right? You can see all the different variables that are here, which is kind of nice. So that is a good way to debug things. We also can create our own variable. So if we say, for example, Apple equals Apple, let's try that. And if I say $ Apple, should be able to unfound echo Apple. Here we go, echo Apple. Right. So if I echo that variable, it then shows me what the result is. So pretty easy to create a variable. If we go through here, we can do that. We can just say, for example, Apple, and then say Apple. And then to refer to it, we just say echo $ Apple, just like that. So these can be really handy for systems configuration stuff. So if you're doing something in a script and you're pulling a value from the environment, that's really where a variable can be really, really helpful. And let's see what else they say about variables here. So if you want to do a local variable, they're used only in the current shell. And there's also variable, like, for example, if you want to create a variable, variables are case sensitive. Giving local variables a lowercase is a convention. Sometimes to set a variable in the shell, you do that, which is what I just did. Putting spaces will cause errors. So let's put a note there that says that, right? So we can say here, spaces will cause errors. And what else can we do here that's kind of fun? So you can see that here's an example. You can echo it. You can echo it. I guess you can also unset, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so let's do that. Let's put in to delete a variable you use unset, i.e. unset $sign Apple. Let's do that. So we know Apple works, right? Because we just did it. We just said $sign Apple. We want to unset Apple. Now if I do echo, why is that not working? Unset that. Oh no, did I do no unset? I think you do it without the. Oh, let's try that. There, yeah, you have to do it without the $sign. To use the variable, you use $sign. So we unset that. There we go. What else can we do here? Exporting a variable. So variable are only in the current shell. So we can play around with this actually. So if we let's create basically a local variable. So we can say like how to test a local variable would be here. So we could say pair equals pair, like that. If I go ahead and I do this, I say pair is equal to pair, and I say echo $pair, right? We see it's available. Now, if I open up a new shell though, and I go, okay, cool, let's echo pair, right? Which we'll type in right here, echo $pair. It's not going to work because it's local. It was only local to that shell, nothing, right? And so how would you get around this? Well, you can use the export. And so if we export this, so let's go ahead in this shell here. Let's now say to fix use export. Now this is local only. There we go. This is only local. Go. Fix use export. Perfect. So what do we do when we want to do export? Well, we can actually type in an export command. Here we can type in exports another kind of fruit. We can say something small like a lemon. Say export lemon. Say lemon equals lemon. That, and then we can say echo $. Lemon. So let's try that. Let's go here. Let's just do export lemon. So I'm in this shell, right? And now if I do echo lemon, that'll work. We already know that'll work. But if I go back to another shell, or actually let's just open up a brand new shell, and let's just type in echo lemon and see what happens. It doesn't work because I think it would have to be a child shell of this shell in order for this to actually show up. And so what this means is that a subshell only will be able to inherit it, but just a random shell won't inherit this fix, but only to child shell, right? So if I wanted to get access to this over and over and over and over again, how would I change this to be available? Well, one of the things you could do, obviously, is you could just put this inside of here, right? You could say like notice right here what they're doing. They're saying export prompt dir tim, right? So if you look through this, there'll probably be other examples of exports inside of here, and so we could do the same thing. We could just do some global exports here and just say like a fruit I want all shells to get. And so now if we did export lemon, this will show up everywhere like that. Export lemon. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close everything. I'm just going to close this shell, close this shell, close this shell, close that shell, go back, open up new terminal. And now let's see what happens if I say echo $lemon. Everybody's got lemon, right? So there are some subtleties that are worth playing around with Bash, and that's one of them. So I think we also can talk a little bit about quoting next here. Let's do that. Let's get into quoting characters. So we have single quotes. Single quotes are used to preserve the literal value. And so in this case, if this was a variable, it's not going to actually use the variable, right? So let's actually use, let's actually do a slightly different example, but similar. So I'll say like we'll create a variable and let's first call date, right? So that's the date. And if we wanted to assign that to today, what happens if I put in today? Let's just double check. That's not a good. It's not a command. So we'll call this today is equal to, and I'll say date. So what this should do is, if I say $, go $sign today, yeah, right. It echoes that value out. So for example, if I did this, if we wanted to play through this example, first we assign the output of a command to a variable. That's how you do it with a command. Then the next thing I do is I verify that it's there. Now here's where the quoting comes into play. So if I type in echo, and I put in a quote, not a backslash, but a quote, and I say today, this won't do anything because it's inside of a quote. Right? So if we go here, you can see that that's actually inside of a quote. Right? So nice to know that there are some distinctions there. And then for a double quote, one of the things that you can do, double quote, the literal values are preserved except for the $sign. So that does make things a little bit trickier because if you use a double quote, it will work, right? So if I said this, I mean, that's definitely pretty subtle. I think not a lot of people know that. There you go. So like if you say a note here that says won't run command, and we say if we do this, we can say won't display variable output, and we say this one will display. That's a very, very subtle difference between those. What else can we learn here? So I guess that's probably the big thing to be aware of in terms of quoting. What else can we cover real quick? Shell expansion. And so the idea is that tilde expansion is probably the one that's probably the most fun to play around with. But there's also brace expansion here. And so these tilde, the idea here is essentially a shortcut here, and this is expanded to home right here. So if we go here and we say, for example, cd into tilde, type in pwd, that's actually the same value as home. So if I say echo $home, it's the same thing, right? So it's just essentially a way of making this little shortcut here when you use shell expansion. So we can even put an example of that here, like this. See, that is the same as that, right? It's the home is equal to this. Any other examples here would be that you could play around with would be, so this is kind of cool, right? Where you can do these wildcards here. So let's try that. So the $sign character introduces parameter expansion, command substitution, or arithmetic expansion here. And so basically if you put it in between those brackets like this, so let's try that. Let's try to do that. Actually, that's kind of a cool command. I haven't really played with that much in my life. Let's go here, echo. There you go. So that's kind of cool. So it just shows you all the matches here for those variables. And if I say, what if I do something like in that do? I guess it's only going to show the variables inside of here. If we go back to this particular example, it's a basic parameter expansion right here. So I might have to play around with that a little bit more. Now, another thing you can do is arithmetic expansion as well. And so that calculates the result. But what if we want to play around with this a little bit more? So like, for example, C section for other practical examples. Let's take a look at this. So echo number numerical expansion. Where's a good expansion? Expansion example. I don't know if I see a good expansion example, but yeah, maybe I can cover that in a later session here. But there's some fun stuff that we were able to cover really briefly, and I think for next time I'll go into maybe lesson 3. We can cover what I was going to cover today, which is the build system and all that kind of stuff. So we can try that next in about 2 weeks. All right. Well, that's a good session for today. I'll see you in weeks, and we'll continue to build this out. I'll also check this in.